Welcome back to Youth Wednesdays and Tobago Updates morning show. You're bringing us here live in Portmore, Scarborough, Tobago. This morning we want to continue the budget debate, but from a more youthful perspective, relative to the parliamentary discussions and the allocations that has been, been brewing on the island post the budget debate 2 Mondays ago, if I'm not mistaken. So this morning we'll be talking with Mr. Luke James Trim, CARICOM Youth Ambassador here representing Tobago. And I will also be joining us this morning in this interview as my co-host is Miss Natalya Nancis. Good morning, Mr. Trim.
Good morning, Dwayne. Good morning, Natalya. Good morning, Tobago. It's always a pleasure to be here on Tobago Updates.
Of course, it's always a pleasure to have Luke with us.
Yes. This morning when I learned that you were coming, I was expecting you to be here in person. However, I often forget, that you wear many hats. You're a student, you're ambassador, you're president of this, president of that. So, we want to get right into the discussion about the budget. What are your general thoughts on the budget, post the budget debate 2 Mondays ago?
Well, Dwayne, at the surface level, the money that was allocated seems to be in the right places. If we're to look at health, national security, and education, I think those are three factors, well, sectors within the country that needed that high allocation. From a youthful perspective, Dwayne, it's very difficult for us as youth leaders or even as young people to really tune into a budget when we're not really included in the process. For example, you would have known that we had the post-budget debate discussion, we had the post and the pre-budget debate discussion, but when are we going to have that opportunity where young people are included during the process? Because if we are to really create a budget that reflects the needs and aspirations of the youth, it is my strong belief that young people need to be included in that process. Actually, when we had the discussion at Parliament, that was one thing we advocated for that opportunity where young people could really be a part of the budget making process, so that we shift away from that tokenistic perspective.
And at which, I mean, you know that the budget, the planning for the budget and the preparations of the budget has many stages. Based on what you're saying, at what stage do you believe that the youth ought to be including, and what does inclusion look like for you based on the discussions that you've been having thus far?
Well, when we have various organizations such as Trinidad and Tobago Youth Councils, in addition to that, we have other youth organizations. Inclusion can come at any stage to me. We have that stage where the budget is presented by the Honorable Minister, Finance Minister. Can we as youth be a part of a committee where he gives that presentation for the Ministry of Youth? He can include something that we would like to see, some policies we would like to see. Moreover, we have that aspect where the actual minister that's responsible for the Ministry of Youth, he will give more detail into what his ministry plans to do where youth are concerned. How can we be a part of that? How can we have a sit-down conversation with the minister and tell him, hey, these are the agendas that we as youth are focusing on, and we would like to see some things implemented, Dwayne. Sometimes people think that inclusion needs to be this big, large thing where we have to actually be in parliament debating, but it starts before, Dwayne. It's really the little things that matter, because we don't like as youth when you give us a document, when you give us a policy, you just give us to review and give 2 cents so you can go on a platform and say, oh, and by the way, we had the youth perspective on this, when in actuality, we didn't really have a say to it. I think that is the main thing we are trying to stay away from. So that is just my opinion on that matter.
All right. And would you say that this your call, for more youth inclusion at key stages in the budget, planning, preparation, and presentation, that your call is a new call, and if not, what is different with this call? What is your hope coming from this call? Because I mean, some might argue, but this is not new. It's not new advocacy. This has been an old thing. What do you hope to happen emanating from your advocacy?
Well, rightfully so, Dewey. This is not a new call. I think other youth that have come before me, they have all had that same sentiment that we want to be included. I think the difference with me or with my position as CARICOM Youth Ambassador is the influence that it carries, especially where the media attention is concerned. So we would have observed that when I would have advocated for the island of Tobago to be allocated more money, that the media houses picked it up. We were in the newspapers, we were on TV. So I think the difference now is that we have more pull when it comes to the media. It's not a matter where we're just speaking and our voices are not being heard. Additionally, we have organizations such as Parliament that's given us that platform to really advocate as young people. So the difference with our advocacy is let me use the right word, is the pull that comes with it. Is the tsunami that it creates. We have so many young people who are tuning in and being sensitized about these issues, that are being informed about this is what we should be fighting for. So in the past, while we would have observed that some youth leaders would have fight for the cause and they would not have gotten the traction that we really wanted to see, now we have the support of the media, we have the support of Parliament, and we even have our own platforms that we are using to really bring our point across.
All right, and now I'm listening to your conversation, and you're saying that you would have liked to see more inclusion, right? What is it, in your opinion, that you would have liked to see in the budget itself? I mean, there is the budget, and then there is your opinion on how the budget should have looked in terms of inclusion for youths or inclusion for Tobago on a whole. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, Natalya, when it comes to my thoughts, especially where the islands are concerned, I have to be very careful with my thoughts, because I realize that there are some mischievous people out there that are trying very hard to politicize my opinions. But in that regard, I think it's very difficult from the island perspective for us to push that youth agenda when we are operating on a very restricted budget. On the surface level, we will hear that the island got this point, that $1 billion, and it sounds really, and you will say to yourself, oh, that's a lot of money. But when you pick it apart, you come to the realization that most of that funds goes towards recurrent expenditure. And when you see the allocation we have for development, island development, and also the youth development, it's very restricted. It is my opinion that if the island is supposed to really step into those development conversations, especially where our youth are concerned, it is extremely difficult for us to do that with the current allocation that we are receiving. Yes, we appreciate the fact that the island of Tobago has received some sort of increase within the past years, but we understand that when you look at the history of the Tobago House of Assembly, we have seen so many administrations passing in and out of the Assembly, and one common denominator that we all had when it comes to advocating for the island of Tobago is that we need more money. Yes, we understand that, okay, there's some sort of increase was given, but I think that it is not enough. It is my opinion that the island has continuously been subjected to a history of insufficiency of funding. And while we appreciate that Trinidad and Tobago are somewhat fraternal twins, and Trinidad may be the larger island, I think that some level of equality or equity needs to be given to the island, so that we don't have to be so dependent on central government to really push the island perspective. You would have asked me what inclusion looks like to me, Natalya. I think it starts with Tobago's autonomy. That is a topic that I have been engaging in from a non-political perspective, thankfully. I was so grateful to see that so many young people, especially here on the university campus, that we were able to have the conversations so that the island can really manage the issues and those sectors that really speaks to what makes us Tobagonians. I think that is one step where it starts. Secondly, I think that it's time for us to stay away from tokenism, Natalya. In these spaces, you will see so many young people in the photo ops, you will see us taking the pictures. But if you are to ask them, so what contribution were you make, and moreover, what contribution did you make that you were able to see implemented? It's very difficult for us to give a positive response. So I think that we need to really work towards bridging that gap between youth and our decision makers and our politicians. I think that mutual respect is what is needed, because sometimes people think it's the age difference between us and the decision makers, but it really comes down to mutual respect, them respecting us and us giving them the respect that they so need. So that's my response to that question.
Okay, and so I have a question. Should we see the upper part of the scale? Because we know that based on past budgets and stuff like that, we have been receiving the lower part of that allocation. So
4.3%.
about 4.3%, right? So should we see that 6.8% that we all hope that someday will come to us? What do you think are some of the things that can come out of it in terms of our island's development? What do you think we can do with that money to help develop Tobago some more, especially from a youth perspective?
Well, Natalia, we are all aware that the DRC would have made a really strong recommendation that the island of Tobago, when it comes to the national budget, receives somewhere between 4.3 to 6.9% of the national budget. And like you rightfully said, we have been observing that we have been receiving the lower end, that's the 4.3%. Now, we all know that very soon we will expect that new airports to roll out right there, the new A&R Robinson Airport, the international airport. And while we appreciate that that was some sort of step towards development, Natalya, the reality is no right-thinking person is going to come to Tobago just to see an airport. It all comes down to the experience that they receive when they exit that airport terminal and start to explore the island. I think that with a greater allocation from the national budget, we can really boost our tourism and orange economy. We can ensure that when people come to the island, that they receive an experience. They receive that type of experience you get when you go to Jamaica and the Montego Bay. Those are the type of conversations you want to push the island of Tobago into. But with a restricted budget, Natalia, the reality is what type of development can we really achieve? But how can we really, develop the island when we have so many things to do? It shouldn't be a matter where we have money and we have to be monopolizing where we allocate this fund to or that fund to or that fund to. It makes no sense to have an airport that's looking so good and modern, and then when you exit the airport terminal, the experience you get from the island doesn't commensurate with that. So I believe that with a greater national allocation from the budget, the island of Tobago can really become like the next Jamaica, the next Montego Bay, the next St. Lucia. Like, we want the island of Tobago to really be in those conversations, Natalia. We can upgrade our heritage parks, or beach facilities can get upgraded. These are the little things that matter. We can start to push more money into our culture. I remember when I was in Trinidad and someone walked up to me and she was giving me her recount of the Belman and Riot Heritage Festival. How can we really make that on a wider scale, Natalia? These are the things, the cultural card that makes us Tobagonians. These are the things that we can push our funding into so that the island really becomes the island that we will want to see.
Yes, I do hear you. Yes.
Thank you very much, Luke. Luke, listen, you seem very pro Tobago, and when you look at the budget, we see where the as you rightfully said, the recurrent expenditure being receiving an increase, but there was actually a decrease in comparison to last year. Last year's allocation for the development expenditure or capital development was 260 million. Now we're seeing 205 million. And emanating from that conversation and that observation, you would have posed a question to our Honorable Senator, Mr. Lawrence Hislop, about his thoughts on the budget. And I don't want to rehash or misquote what he said, but my question to you is, are you satisfied with the rationale that is given when persons say that, oh well, there are ministries in Trinidad that are given allocations for expenditure in Tobago? Are you satisfied with that rationale, and is it a cogent rationale? What are your thoughts?
Dwayne put me on the spot here. I have to be very diplomatic with my response. In regards to that rationale, Dwayne, I think that rightfully so, people may have their agendas, and at the end of the day, there are people who need to protect the organization that they serve. Yes, we understand that people may have different reasonings for whatever decisions they make, but from my opinion, I don't quote me on this, I don't think it was a satisfactory enough response, especially when we are trying to have conversations where the youth are concerned. I think that the response was one that was extremely predictable because it was something that we would have already heard. I don't think the response was something that was unique. It was something that we anticipated would have been said on national television for various reasons, and reasons we don't blame him or anyone for, because at the end of the day, we don't expect anyone to go against their organizations or go against the agenda of the organization that they serve. I think, Dwayne, it is rightfully so that we understand that the island of Tobago has always been asking for more, and that's why I'm always interested to engage in the conversation, because it's not a conversation that's unique to one political party. Like I said earlier, we have seen so many political parties pass through the THC, and they all had that same sentiment that the island of Tobago needs more. And when you move from Tobago and you start to live in Trinidad, and you listen to the perspectives they have about the island and the way they think about us as Tobagonians, just like that, conversations about our island's autonomy, it starts to get a bit more potency. It starts to sound a bit more attractive. That cultural shift from the island of Tobago to Trinidad, it makes you just have that pride for your island and have more appreciation for being Tobagonian, and to really wave that Tobagonian pride high. Dwayne, I think that as time progresses, I think that we should be seeing a bit more conversations where the island is concerned. I would have observed that the Honorable Prime Minister, when he would have given his contribution in Parliament, he would have urged that the opposition support the Tobago Autonomy Bill. He sounded passionate about it. I know that we understand that on the where it comes to the current THA, while they are for Tobago's autonomy, they are not satisfied with the bill at its current stage. So I look forward to see how they are going to mend that situation. I'm always locked in. I'm always observing everything from both sides. I listen to all sides and filter myself and give the most unbiased opinion I can. So I'm really looking forward to see how that bill progress. And yeah.
How much I appreciate the fact that you would have highlighted the fact that this ought not to be a political issue. Sorry, it is a political issue. It should not be a partisan issue, right? And I too can share in the experience of being a Tobagonian studying in Trinidad. And sometimes when you hear the commentary coming from our counterparts and our colleagues in Trinidad because of our development and how it has been stymied over the years. You mentioned that there have been different incarnations of the THA, but there have also been different incarnations of the central government who have continually been given Tobago on the lower echelon of the DRC range, right? And I very much appreciate the fact that you would have you would have lent your views on that. But my question to you is, Luke, partisan, non-partisan view, but one that is political, non-partisan. What is next in terms of helping Tobago get the development from a youthful perspective and from an overall perspective? Because the youth are the future for tomorrow. Evident by you being here. All right. What is the next move? What is your next move in terms of advocacy? Because there is a need for us as Tobagonians to really begin to speak out. Because the longer we take to develop is the more expensive and impossible it becomes. What are your thoughts?
Well, Dwayne, I think you and I both know what is my next step, even though it's not something that I'm gonna speak about just yet. But it takes me back to when I would have visited Antigua for the Small Island Developing States Conference at International Conference. And we saw the benefit of what that conference had for the island of Antigua and Barbuda in terms of the footwork into the island, in terms of so many young people flying into the island for these conferences. And it made me question, how can the island of Tobago experience that level of attendance? How can the island of Tobago really get into those conversations when it comes to conferences? We are appreciating the youth space when we are traveling and we go into these conferences. Tobago is oftentimes left out. So my agenda and my next step is, how can the island of Tobago be the next destination for a summit of that magnitude, or any type of summit, doing? And with that is all I will say. I don't want to take the cat out of the bag too.
All right. But Luke, we want to thank you for joining us this morning. It's always a pleasure having you. And I hope that wherever you go and wherever you are right now, that you pull a lot more Tobagonians, regardless of their political divide, wherever they're studying, it doesn't matter. right? I pray that, you know, your advocacy does redound to something tangible for Tobago in terms of its development, especially where youth are concerned. Thank you very much for joining us, and it's always a pleasure having you here, Mr. Trim, right? Do have a pleasant day. And guys, unfortunately, this brings us to the end of this interview. We have another one coming up to you, and then we go over to GMT Tobago. So just remember to
Share the live,
share the live, share the live.
We'll
We'll
be
be
right
right
back.
back.